just to understand like what that chronic inflammatory response is doing. What are those symptoms that are occurring that you need to be looking out for? Because there are many people that are out there with just unexplained symptoms. I feel tired all the time. I have this brain fog that I can't clear and get my thoughts right. That's an inflammatory response.
All right, welcome to the Healing Reset, a podcast aimed at providing hope in your body's ability to heal and then maintain that health. You guys, contrary to today's belief, what you are told, you're amazing and you're designed to heal. You're designed to be well and stay well. I'm Jess, your host. Today we have on Dr. Donna Mazzola, pharmacist, nutritionist, autoimmune expert, author, mom, kind of jack of all trades. You guys, I can't wait to dive into this interview. But first, let me give you a little bit of just background. Dr. Donna, she's a pharmacist who's always had a fascination with natural healing and preventative care. Right up our alley, right? She obtained her doctorate in pharmacy, and with this realized that medicine does have a place in healing, but there's a balance between nutrition and medicine that will impact disease. She became obsessed with this balance after a personal diagnosis with autoimmune. Her desire is to identify the root cause related to the rise of autoimmune and other inflammatory diseases. This pushed her to gain her master's degree in functional medicine and human nutrition. She launched her platform, Dr. Autoimmune Girl. This is how I connected with her. Her stuff is awesome. Go check her out, Dr. Autoimmune Girl. But it's her mission to just educate people like us on the healing powers of food and to give the meaning to the concept of food as medicine. So that will be just the entirety of our context today and what we talk about. She's the author of the Immunity Food Fix. Guys, she's on fire. So welcome to the show, Dr. Donna.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for this.
Yeah, me too. You're super well known for your work. I mean, you've got a blog that's powerful. And then you add that with just the social media platform, the interviews that you've done. You make stuff really simple and digestible, but this accumulation of wisdom really comes from humble roots. How did you get down this path of autoimmune healing with food?
Yeah, I mean, I can start by like going all the way back to when I graduated, right, pharmacy school. And my love for healing was more in the chronic care space. And I worked with, chronic care patients, but with those chronic diseases that we're most well aware of, like diabetes, high cholesterol, heart failure. And even in that time, as I'm educating these patients, I found they had no concept of nutrition or lifestyle management. I mean, they were given a lot of medications. They were told they had these chronic illnesses, and this was kind of the only way. I had patients who had diabetes that didn't know what a carbohydrate was. So like, just to give you context as to the gap in conventional medicine that exists.
And we talked a lot about diabetes for our listeners out there. There's a whole episode on that, how it's not something that you have to take to the grave with you. It's not a diagnosis that should be chronic.
Yeah, you could absolutely reverse it. You can, and there's a lot that can be done. And quite frankly, like autoimmune disease was never on my radar as those diseases that can be managed with lifestyle or medicine. And it wasn't something I worked with in clinical practice much. But then I was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition, and I, touted myself as being healthy, and I exercised regularly, and I lived this lifestyle that you may consider like, okay, overall healthy. How can this happen to me? And I think that's where it hit me. And it was like, there's a lot I don't know. It's very clear here. And because I must have done something wrong, or something must have gone wrong outside of what I'm aware of that caused this to happen. And I need to figure out what that is.
And that is when suddenly you're doing everything quote unquote right, but then you get hit with this. It's just like, this can impact and does impact so many people, regardless of lifestyle at times.
Exactly. Right. So as you said, it was a very humbling experience for me, because it was like, wait, hold on. I don't know everything clearly. And there's something missing here from what's taught and what I've learned. And so that took me back to school to get a master's degree in human nutrition and functional medicine to better understand that root cause approach. And honestly, at the time, I just went back to school to take care of myself. Like, I had no other plans. I was just like, I'm going to do this and see where it leads. It became like my passion. I quickly after being and going through the coursework, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so fascinating. And I need to share this with the world. And that's how the blog was born. It was ultimately like, I'm learning this. I need to give this back out, right? Like, it's like, let me put this back out into the universe.
Why wasn't this taught foundationally to everyone? Right? We're so caught up in like, oh, we get a diagnosis. What do we do to treat the diagnosis versus this foundational? How do we eat? How do we support our system? How do we detox? Yes, preventative.
Yeah.
What you just said, I read something that you wrote, your awakening, basically, like you woke up to realize that you not only have this gift and ability to take the complex information that sometimes we don't want to read the studies. We don't want to read all this complex information and simplify it into these digestible parts. And that became your purpose. So we have this reputable scientific studies, these ways to look at information that people don't want to just sit and read, and books and how is this impacting the chemistry or the biology of my body? And then you can put that in a simplified format so that myself can read it and say, oh, I need to take this out and input this into my daily routine or whatever that is. What does that look like now for you, now that you're much more established in this space? What does that look like for you educating people on food as medicine?
Yeah. So I think it was like multiple folds to that. So the biggest reason why I even got out there to start putting information is that it was hard for me to find a reputable source to be educated on. And there's a lot of opinion out there. People put things out without backed references. It's dangerous because people are following that. They're following others' opinions, others' maybe experiences that maybe work for them, but not for others. And like that concerned me as a practitioner. So I'm like, okay, I'm out here learning. It's reputable. I have everything backed by scientific references, by studies, things that have occurred. It's not my opinion. So let me put it out there in that context.
And simultaneously, it's working for you, I would assume.
Exactly. I'm benefiting myself, but so in a sense, I need to give back. That's how I looked at it. But yeah, it is taking, this information is complicated. Just the understanding of the immune system itself is complicated, And so I do have that gift that I can take something complex and explain it to you in 3 sentences. And you're like, oh, I get it now. And I realized that as I started my page. And I think honestly, that led to my book, which I'm able to take all this information, this knowledge, this experience, and put it into a very simple text that starts at the basics, starts with the basics of like understanding the immune system. I think like through the past couple of years in this pandemic, we've talked more about the immune system than we ever have in our entire life. And everything I've seen, it's like made me realize we don't even understand how the immune system works.
How does Dr. Donna break that down? The immune system?
I mean, we break it down ultimately into the different parts of the immune system. It's basically 3 parts. So I kind of give you like, here's the mucosal immune system, right? Before you get to the inside, then you have like your innate immune system that's activated first, before it tries to do its job, before we activate the adaptive immune system. That then is like, and I break it down with like analogies, like it's almost like and I'll kind of give people a hint into it in the book, but it's like, here's your security checkpoint and your response team and your special forces. And this is how they work together collectively, depending on what that response is that's occurring in the body. And so just that first chapter is just so simple. It's so compelling. And then it makes you realize, okay, now I get how and why I can incorporate foods to make a change and whatnot. So my biggest way of educating is to really get to the why. So I feel like if people understand the why, then they will implement the how. But if I start with, this is like, or the what, if I start with the what, you're not going to do it unless you understand the why and the how.
Well, and autoimmunity is on the rise. It's a statement that's just like most people understand. Autoimmunity is on the rise. If you don't have a condition yourself, someone. My condition's Hashimoto's. We've talked about a lot on the show. I believe yours was Hashimoto's as well. And so if you aren't that person, somebody, and it just begs, like you got to answer that question. What is the immune system? And listening to you talk, it's like, if we want to know why autoimmunity is here and why we have that, then we need to understand the immune system and where this chronic inflammation is starting and coming from, which is kind of the breakdown you're leading into.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's the key to healing is like, we can't just tell people what to do. We need to educate them on what's happening so they want to be better.
Why is that not happening in America? Like, where is modern day America failing us in terms of health?
And I think that's just it. A couple things. I think in the medical establishment, like medical school, pharmacy school, I mean, I was conventionally trained. Many of my friends went to medical school. There's like one nutrition course taught across, the whole 4 years. It's not something that is emphasized. And if it is, it's strictly emphasized in those core chronic conditions where it is part of guidelines, like diabetes or, like implement yourself for 3 months. If it doesn't work, start meds. I mean, that's typically what occurs. And there's like no guidance given to patients, they're not educated. Sometimes I tell people like, can't be mad at the conventional medicine doctor because they were never educated on this, and our system doesn't train them in this way, which is wrong. There needs to be like a whole reset to how that education occurs. And then there's like lack of time. I mean, people have like 10 minutes with their doctor. Like how do you, I mean, you prescribe a med and then like you really have time to talk about like what they need to eat and the lifestyle changes and the why behind. No way. I mean, you think like you think at functional medicine, like your first appointment is typically an hour long, like you really need to understand the root cause of why things are occurring. So it's just very different approaches. And unfortunately, like the vast majority of our medical system is conventionally trained, and that's not viewed as necessary. It's not viewed, right. It's not accepted, like well accepted, and so therefore there's a lack of knowledge there.
What would you do with the food pyramid that I grew up learning in school?
Oh, well, I look at that like there's like so many inflammatory aspects to it. And I think that's what we want to focus on when we're thinking autoimmunity. And so like, I don't know where on the food pyramid, I think it's pretty high up there, like includes dairy products, right? Like kids, as soon as they hit 1 year old, they need to start drinking like, I don't know how many glasses of milk in order for them to grow. And that's just that whole concept and the history of where that came from. It's like mind blowing. We don't need it. It's highly inflammatory. I think what the data shows is by like the age of 8 or 9, most people can't even digest lactose. Huge proportion of that population is actually lactose intolerant, just never really diagnosed. And so people have just gotten used to this feeling of like bloating and gas, and it's like normal, which it's not. We shouldn't normalize these symptoms because they're not normal. Excessive consumption of grains. Well, I mean, like, yeah, whole grains to a degree yes, they are good, right? It's like high fiber, things like that.
Yeah.
But like it's the gluten and the glyphosate component, from our sprayed crops, the excess additives of gluten within a lot of the commercialized products just for better texture. It's like we've overwhelmed our body, to be able to break down these proteins. So I feel like I would shift a little bit of that and like focus less on red meats. So what are the inflammatory aspects?
We're talking about preventative care for those out there. Like, I don't have an autoimmune disease. This is also prevented. We're focusing on your immune system, but who really is this book for? Is it for people that are in the thicks of their joints are very hot, very inflamed? They're in the middle of a flare. Is it preventative? Is it for someone like me who, right now is taking thyroid supplements to make sure that I am supported, but working on some dietary changes? Who do you write this for? Who do you address?
This is for everyone. As you said, it's preventative, right? And so you may already been diagnosed, and you're on medications and you're still symptomatic, and now you need to identify like how do you reduce that inflammation, that inflammatory response. It's for anybody who's on a Western diet, which is everybody, right?
Everybody.
That's everybody. So just to be educated on the concepts of chronic inflammation in general and how chronic inflammation leads to chronic illness. And chronic illness is not just autoimmunity, right? We're talking diabetes, we're talking Alzheimer's as an inflammatory condition, cancer, right? Ultimately, the end of this, the whole spectrum, cancer, that's an inflammatory condition that occurs where the vast majority of it is not genetic related, it's environment. And a lot of that environmental factor has to do with our food and our diet and the things that we're putting in our body. In the US, 1 out of 2 people will be diagnosed with cancer. That's scary. That's a scary number. And why is it that case in the US and not in other parts of the world? And we need to focus on our lifestyle, right? The high stress life that we lead and the foods that we eat. I mean, some people go to a drive-through fast food 3 times a day. If you're that person, if you go through a drive-through for fast food at any point in the day, or at all during the week, and you're consuming this inflammatory diet, this book is for you too, right? Just to understand like what that chronic inflammatory response is doing. What are those symptoms that are occurring that you need to be looking out for? Because there are many people that are out there with just unexplained symptoms. I feel tired all the time. I have this brain fog that I can't clear and get my thoughts right. That's an inflammatory response.
A lot of people will go to their doctors with those symptoms and they'll say, you're stressed, you're not sleeping enough, you're a mom, you should be tired, whatever that burden is that you're running with in life. And that's an excused, like, that's just excused. That's just the part of the life you're in. Press on, people, press on, because that's your body saying, yo, something's off.
Exactly. And a lot of times, like, there may not be, and it takes like years, like 10 years for most people to actually get an autoimmune diagnosis. So they're suffering with these inflammatory type symptoms. So if you continue to expose yourself to this lifestyle and these foods that we're eating, if you have any kind of genetic predisposition, you're going to turn those genes on and you are going to ultimately then develop an autoimmune disease. So let's prevent that.
I really wanted to establish that no matter where you're at in your walk, this book, this podcast, this is for you. So the Immunity Food Fix, just this conversation, this is for you, because we all live in this world and have this toxic burden on us, right? There's some of this stuff we can't avoid. And so let's start making these choices and intentionally choosing health and intentionally choosing specific foods.
Exactly. And one thing I'll say is, like, you think about the past 2 years and with COVID and the pandemic, and how many headlines did we see that mortality was highest in those with vitamin D deficiency. Mortality was highest in those with metabolic illnesses, those with diabetes, those with high blood pressure. That right there should show you the reason for that is because of our lifestyle, our lack of nutrients, our poor eating habits, that our immune system wasn't able to fight off this foreign invader that entered our body. So, like, just thinking about the past 2 years, the immune system is essential and important to every single person. And we don't need to live in fear. We need to be knowledgeable, empower ourselves, right, to take control of our health and not live in fear of anything controlling us. And I think that's what's critical.
And then the immune system will do its job.
Exactly.
It will do its proper job versus working overtime and manifesting in a specific autoimmune diagnosis, which I found interesting. I was following your page on Instagram and you had said, ask me a question. And so people are just thundering these questions at you. And it was like, I have this autoimmune, I have this autoimmune. And every single person had a different question, whether rheumatoid arthritis, Hashimoto's, Crohn's, no matter what it was just like the same answer. It starts with foundational foods. And so I think that's something when you're talking about those headlines and what we're reading, it doesn't matter where you're at or where you start. Our starting point can be similar, whether I have Hashimoto's and you have rheumatoid arthritis. One of the questions I did have is a lot of our listeners are on something already. They've been diagnosed and they are on something to bring their immune system down. Speak to those people who are like, I've already been living with this for 10 years. I'm in a high flare and I'm on medications because I can't function. I literally can't function without them right now. Help me.
Yeah. So if you look at my page, you know that my mantra is balancing nutrition and medicine.
Yeah.
And so you've been diagnosed, you are on a medication, you're still in a flare, you're still symptomatic, you can't be off of it. That's okay. We don't need to villainize that. We don't need to feel as failures because of that, number one. But now what are you doing on this side of the balance with the nutritional lifestyle side of it, right? So can you say, yes, I still consume inflammatory foods. No, I don't sleep enough. I'm highly stressed. I don't really get a lot of movement. Then yeah, for sure, you're going to be on the highest possible dose and you're still going to feel bad. But then can you say, I'm on the highest dose and today I'm going to implement changes. I'm going to make some changes in my diet. I'm going to follow some of the recommendations in this book. I am going to focus on my sleep and ensure I'm getting 7 to 9 hours every single night. I'm going to practice some type of movement daily. Okay, we implement those 3 things. Now, all of a sudden, the shift for nutrition is up here and the medication comes down. I've seen people lower doses, right, from what they need because you're providing the body what it needs to. You're taking out that inflammatory response That's what it needs. I've seen people completely get off medications. That's a wonderful thing. That may not 100% happen for every single person, but number one thing that is going to happen is you're going to feel better. And ultimately, like, you're going to live a better quality of life. And that is the key to all of this. Like, it's not to focus on, I'm on this dose, you're on that dose, I'm doing bad. Doesn't matter. Like, are you implementing everything that you can to take control of your health? And do you feel better? You can answer yes, then you're winning. We don't have to be villainized in any way.
Yeah, I love that word. And that's what we talk about a lot, like the shame culture. People shouldn't come to a health podcast to feel shame at where they're currently at. They should come to a health podcast or a health blog or whatever that is to feel hope and to feel like they have this community behind them, rooting for them and just, surrounding them. And I love that idea of feeling villainized and saying, no. That's like, we're just all at a different starting point. Let's start together though. So let's talk about that path of healing that you just started touching on for our friends out there with autoimmunity, for our friends out there who just want to prevent chronic inflammation. We've talked a little bit about your book, The Immunity Food Fix, and that's really diving into food as medicine in that concept. So foreign concept, because here we think of medicine as medicine. So talk about food as medicine, the healing components that we get offered with the choices we make.
For sure. So we talk about food as medicine. Many times the focus ends up being, okay, I have to eat fruits and vegetables, and that's it. That's the component, that where it ends. And I always like to say it's looking at plant-based foods. And like in the book, we break it down as the diversity of it, right? So eating the rainbow, the different colors, what they mean, what are the phytochemicals behind every color, what each color kind of represents, looking at like red being anti-inflammatory, orange being hormones, yellow being digestion. So like really breaking it down for you, super simple.
Is that true? Food colors correlate to different.
Oh yeah, because those colors correlate to the phytochemicals that are found in those fruit. And there's science behind what those phytochemicals do. And that is what you'll find in the information. Yeah. And it's like fascinating.
Can I stop really quick there? Because it just made me think of, the SAD diet, the standard American diet. And someone was saying, look what your kids eat. Your kids eat brown. They eat oatmeal, chicken tenders, French fries. And again, no shame culture. Parents, sometimes you are in just this season of trying to survive. But if you start paying attention to what your kids eat, applesauce, brown. And so listening to you talk, it's just this is reaffirming what I already know of food diversity. And when I think of like prepping for my children, colors.
It's all about colors. Colors focusing on what other aspects are there? Like seeds, like seeds are, a seed grows an entire plant. So just think about that concept and the nutritional components found in seeds, like think about chia seeds and hemp seeds, right? So like sunflower, sesame, like all of those, there's a lot behind them. Nuts, oils, proteins, herbs, like those are all plant-based.
Hey, can you give me the quick Dr. Donna's opinion on peanuts? Because so many people that I read, peanuts are not a nut, but yet who doesn't love them some brown peanut butter?
Yeah. I mean,
give it to me.
So peanuts are a legume. So for some people, if they have kind of a, breakdown in their GI permeability, right? So what we refer to as like leaky gut. Yeah. Then they may react, right, to legumes, until they kind of like heal and seal that. And then maybe they can reintroduce. So that's number one, why peanuts, right? Because they're legume. Legumes can be inflammatory for some, not for all. The other thing is the crop itself is, highly, sprayed with glyphosate and whatever. So it's hard. So to me, like, do I consume peanut butter periodically? Yeah. But do I have like the cleanest form of peanut butter, ensuring it's organic, it's clean, right? There's like non-GMO. It's also like a highly GMO crop. So you have to find clean peanut butter, that are not going to have all those other components to it, but then at the same time ensuring that you can tolerate legumes as well and that those don't cause an inflammatory response. So that's kind of the complex story of peanut.
It is complex, but that's got to apply, when you get to the point to where you have, quote unquote, got your gut to a place of resilience. I'd imagine then it's like, we're not aiming for perfection, but we are aiming to maintain health. And so just like you said, if you talked about heal and seal, which I've never heard that term before, but I like it in terms of leaky gut. If you're healed and sealed, especially then, it's like our bodies are resilient and they're, as I always say, you're just designed to heal and you're amazing and it can detox. So we're not aiming for perfection or this obsession around diet and what we put in our bodies, but we are aiming for longevity and creating this balance. And so peanut butter might be one of those things that's triggering for some all the way through. But I've often heard no on peanut butter. And, me, I'm like, yes, I'm peanut butter. I love it. But those are good boundaries. Second hard question before we get into a little bit more food as medicine, because I can feel people wanting to know, what is Dr. Donna's stance on alcohol? Everyone wants their glass. Well, I can't say everyone. A lot of people enjoy a glass of wine with dinner, a beer with their friends, some more than others. Where do you sit with alcohol?
I mean, unfortunately, alcohol is one of those foods that's inflammatory in excess amounts, obviously. Like regular consumption of alcohol is known to cause irritation and inflammation, of the esophagus, of the larynx, impact the gut wall. And so like, I don't know that we have an exact number on quantities that I can give a recommendation, right, on how much alcohol 2 to 3 times a week, one like serving, so will probably be safe. Okay, right? Like it's about balance. But if you're in that healing phase, I would say no to alcohol, right? So we got to heal first, then we got to heal and seal, then we maintain.
Yeah, we got to heal
right?
and seal. All right. So now that I'm out of the cheats question, back to just the awesome proponents of foods. We touched on seeds. We touched on nuts. Yeah. Anything else people should be thinking as they're plating their dinner or waking up in the morning to eat breakfast?
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing, and I tried to keep it simple. Like I've been asked many times, what are the recipes in this book? They're not recipes. They're really just giving you the science behind these foods, right? That are anti-inflammatory, that are gut healing, that improve the microbiome, that just reduce inflammation. I mean, it's amazing. And so the recommendation to keep it simple is eat 9 to 12 servings of plants a day.
What's a serving?
It depends on what you're eating, right? Okay. And so we do have the servings broken out like in the book, but like, if it's quinoa, right? Is it like a cup of quinoa? If it's, an apple, it's an apple. That's a serving, right? One piece of fruit, it's like typically a cup to half a cup. Like it just depends on what we're consuming. But like, how do you do that? People then, I can't do that. Like immediately it's like, I can't eat 12 servings of fruits and vegetables. Yeah, but you're forgetting all the other components. Like you can make a morning smoothie that encompasses vegetables, fruits, encompasses seeds, right? Encompasses some nuts, like you put some nut butter in there. You can add some protein to it. So like, yeah, actually you can hit that. You can be halfway there with just your breakfast if you really start just being conscious of it. And I think that's the thing is that we're not. And most people immediately hear that and they're like, I can't do that. There's no way I can do that. It's like, no, you probably can. You just need to be knowledgeable and be given the right tools.
Well, we're such creatures. And I say this blanketed. So I know not everyone's going to relate to this, but like I'm a creature of habit, and stepping into the unknown or eating vastly different than what I've trained myself to eat or what I've grown up eating like can be really hard. And sometimes you put these mental blocks like, oh, it's going to be expensive buying organic before you even say, well, what is the price difference between organic strawberries and non-organic strawberries? So with that thought, it's just like stepping out a little at a time and trying to understand what feels right on your body. And with that book, maybe it is understanding what do I need to input and then what do I need to take out, and inputting something for 1 week and feeling it on your body, and then taking out fast food hiatus. Just take it out.
Soda. Just do it for a week. See what happens. Like little things. And then adding in anti-inflammatory foods, like some of these foods that we talk about in the book, add those in regularly and see how that makes you feel, and at the end of the day, if you do it, you will feel better. And if you feel better and you like it, then you're unlikely to kind of like relapse back to the way you do it, right?
What is your blanketed opinion on gluten?
Oh, quite honestly, I avoid it. And anybody with autoimmune conditions, I typically recommend to avoid it as well, because it is inflammatory in nature. Unfortunately, with our crop, what can you trust? I've done posts like, is it glyphosate or is it gluten? Like, which one is it that we're reacting to? Because like all of the grain is just contaminated that's out in this country. And there's other scientific studies that demonstrate like just a molecular mimicry with gluten where your immune system, kind of views the molecular structure of it similar to some of your tissue. And therefore, because of its in existence, it also attacks some of that tissue.
That's
So there's
especially in thyroid, correct?
exactly. So there's some science behind some of that. So it's like, I just don't play with it. I'm like, let's just eliminate it altogether. And the grain in the crop has changed. Like my mom will say this all the time, like, well, we always ate bread and there was never any problems. I'm like, well, what you ate back in the day, or even, maybe what we grew up on early in life. Yeah, it was nothing like it is today. It's not the same. The way the grain is brought up, the way it's farmed and harvested. I mean, everything is different. And unfortunately, it's so like manufactured that you can't trust it. And we've seen that it does, impact the gut lining. It does impact the gut wall. Many people react, and most people feel better when they eliminate it. And so there is this gluten sensitivity that's out there. But I caution, if you're not going to eat gluten, to not then incorporate your diet with processed gluten-free snacks and whatnot, because then that's a bigger problem.
Yeah. For our listeners, you read the labels on some of the gluten-free stuff. And it's just, I mean, I can't say it's just as harmful. I don't exactly know, but you can't pronounce most of them.
No, you can't. And so sometimes people look at it like, oh, I'm on a gluten-free diet, so I'm healthy. No, that doesn't mean you're healthy. That you've taken this label of this is gluten-free. And like they've marketed it like things like they'll put on rice, like gluten-free. Well, we know gluten-free is rice. It's like rice is gluten-free. It's naturally gluten-free. But so like don't fall for the marketing aspect of it. Recognize that like, yes, you probably want to avoid it. It has an impact on your gut. It is inflammatory in nature, but then like replace it with other options, like if you're looking at other carbohydrate type options or, starchy vegetables, or other kinds of grains, like consider things like quinoa. Yes, rice, brown rice, white rice, consider things, like your potatoes and sweet potatoes and whatnot. So like replace with more healthy options, but don't go for those like processed gluten-free options. Like that's defeating the purpose.
Blanket opinion on sugar. White.
Oh, it's horrible.
Sugar.
It's
Okay.
the devil.
Okay.
Horrible.
That's as far as we need to go.
Horrible. I'll just say I don't have it in my house.
Okay.
I don't sugar. Like, no way.
Okay. That was strong. You guys heard it here first. Blanket opinion on dairy. We kind of already touched on, but dairy in no circumstance.
Yeah. I mean, so again, dairy is again, how are the cows being brought up? What is in the milk? It's highly inflammatory in nature. Some people have asked, like, what about, like pure unprocessed dairy? It can be tried to see how it feels. What I've seen a lot too is like, if you look at in some of the literature that like dairy from goat, like goat cheese, goat milk, yogurt is less reactive than that of cows. And so where this whole concept of like drinking milk and came from is the fact that it was like a convenient component of all necessary macronutrients. So it had the right amount of carbs, right amount of fat, right amount of protein for children. And it was convenient and it was easy. And like, so you could ensure that they were getting the macronutrient content they need. But there's other facets of it that are not good. Right. And so that's really kind of the history of like why like dairy has been recommended. There's other political aspects with like dairy farming and whatever. Like we don't have to get into all that. But then like the question is like, I mean, do you really need it? And when you do consume it, how do you feel? Again, like most people are gassy, most people are bloated, most people, it doesn't sit well with them. And that just tells you like, I mean, I just think about it this way, like you're drinking a cow's breast milk.
Yeah.
What other animal does that? Like, what other mammal drinks another mammal's breast milk? Nobody.
Yeah.
Gross.
That's
Period.
yeah.
It's just gross.
I haven't thought of it like that.
Right.
I've never personally loved the taste of milk. So that hasn't been my thing, drinking another animal's breast milk. However, cheese. Recently we brought home a baby girl about 4 months ago, and I learned that she couldn't handle if I ate the cheese, any of the dairy. And I do have to say I cut that out for a reason bigger than myself, which probably made me cut it out easier. And I felt so much better, which is just a interesting thing to process. How do I feel in my own skin? I didn't do this for me or for my autoimmune disease. I didn't even think about it. I've thought about gluten, but never dairy. And when I cut it out, it's like, I feel better. And so I think that's just the call to our crew out here who's listening is just like, how do you feel when you make these changes? Really sit in your skin and ask yourself some good questions. And feel out what does my body feel when I do remove fast food? Does it feel worse? Can't imagine it would, but ask yourself.
Right. So at the end of the day, it's like, I'm arming you with the knowledge that you need. It's a matter of you implementing it, assessing for yourself how you feel. It's like, you need to be empowered to take control. Like, you can't wait on anybody. You can't be a doctor. Like, it has to be you. And you can't put the blame on anybody else. Right. So the information is out there. Educate yourself. You can do that. And you can take it into your own hands. That's my mission. It's like to empower everybody to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Well, Dr. Donna, let's tie it up and tell everybody 3 things. Doesn't matter. Doesn't have to be about food. 3 things that they can do for better health today.
They can sleep. They can move. And ultimately de-stress, like some form of meditation and breathing, right? So like, I know I focus a lot on food, but to me, those are like low-hanging fruit that you can do now that are also quite anti-inflammatory. Like we take 8 hours of sleep for granted. Like, body needs to regenerate itself. Your body also needs movement. It can't just sit all day. And you need to, again, de-stress, like just clear your mind, breathe, meditate, go somewhere else with it. Right. And just like clear your mind and let yourself get into that like restorative sleep. Like those are 3 things that there's proven science behind all of it. It's beneficial for anybody and easily be implemented, right? As opposed to this whole full diet change we're talking about. Like you can even start with that.
Yeah, I love that. Well, where can our listeners find you? We've got this wealth of knowledge. Where can they access it?
Yeah. So you can check out my website, drautoimmunegirl.com. You can subscribe to my newsletter. There you can find my gut healing protocol. A link to my book will give you a lot more details around what you can find inside the book. You can pre-order now. It'll be dropped in your mailbox on June 7th. Can't wait. But then also, if you're big on social media, Instagram, Facebook, Dr. Autoimmune Girl, I put out content just about every single day. And so again, easy, digestible pearls just for you to take control of your health.
Cool. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
This podcast is for informational purposes only. Statements and views expressed in this podcast are not medical advice and have not been evaluated by the FDA. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse nor accept responsibility for statements made by guests.